This is BBC One, now to Westminster and Andrew Neil for This Week.
Did you know that shaving with stone razors was technologically possible from Neolithic times? Did you? Did you? No.
QI.
Cambridge education. Useless. And that the oldest portrait showing a shaved man with a moustache is an ancient Iranian or Scythian horseman from 300 BC. I mean, did you? No. Take that again, Cambridge. Such information may seem a tad frivolous to viewers of a serious political programme such as This Week, but with austerity all round and only 9 days left to save the euro, we're in need of a little light diversion. The BBC's dashing deputy political editor, James Landale, has been disappointing ladies everywhere for the past month by growing a moustache for charity. But I don't blame him, she's a very sweet girl. Here's his roundup of the week.
Like the Chancellor, George Osborne, I've spent much of the last month looking for growth, a little facial hair to raise money for the Movember cancer campaign. But in the House of Commons this week, the only growth to be found was on the faces of MPs.
Can I first of all congratulate him and the other 37 members who've opted to grow additional facial hair in this month of November.
It was a rare moment of relief in a week when the political landscape was transformed. A government whose raison d'etre was economic competence was forced to admit that the economy was tanking. The deficit will not now be cut by the next election, spending will have to be trimmed for another 2 years, and the next election will not be about who's going to cut which taxes, but about who we trust to finish the job of fixing the economy.
The central forecast we published today from the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility does not predict a recession here in Britain. But they have unsurprisingly revised down their short-term growth prospects for our country, for Europe and for the world.
On and on went the grim numbers, but even these, it emerged, were on the optimistic side. All this gloom was based on the extraordinary assumption that all is well in Euroland, just as the Fed propped up European banks with a fistful of dollars.
But if the rest of Europe heads into recession, it may prove hard to avoid one here in the UK.
The Shadow Chancellor, Ed Balls, may be a sharp chap, and he's had a lot of fun pointing out the flatlining economy. Thank you, chaps. He thinks he's been proved right, but he's struggling to convince voters that Labour's Plan B is better than the Tory Plan A.
Growth flatlining, down this year, next year and the year after. Unemployment rising. More borrowing than the plan which the Chancellor inherited at the last general election. The verdict is in. Plan A has failed, and it has failed colossally.
Pack up all my cares and woes. Here I go, singing low. Bye, bye, blackbird.
But what of the coalition, that union of barefaced Tories and beardy Lib Dems? The truth is that the economic gloom is binding them closer together. They're already talking about what they're going to do after the next election, and MPs on both sides are getting nervous. It's clearly going to be a hairy ride. Let's go.
So you are going into the next election promising further billions of pounds in cuts in public spending. That is what you're going to say in your manifesto at the next election.
I'm afraid so, yes.
I thought your promise was that in the last year of this government, you would not necessarily be giving unequivocal endorsement to every government policy.
Because of the way that economic circumstances have deteriorated, we need to make this commitment for future years. Sure. So yes, Liberal Democrats and Conservatives will work together in government to set out plans for those following 2 years.
Amid all this, the public sector was in a lather and went on strike. Some ministers tried to calm things down and avoid a shouting match with the unions, but they clearly hadn't told the Chancellor and the Education Secretary. Michael Gove reminded us that he too had once been on strike. Yes, that's him, the clean-shaven fellow on the left.
I believe that people should have the choice to be members of a union.
But he's changed his tune now. No more soft soap from him.
Among those union leaders are people who fight hard for their members and whom I respect. But there are also hardliners, militants, itching for a fight.
All my cares and woe, here I go.
For David Cameron and Ed Miliband, the strikes were a battle for public opinion. Would the voters blame the Prime Minister or the unions? What did they make of the Labour leader's refusal to condemn or support the action? In the House of Commons, the knives were out.
And what has the Prime Minister gone round saying to people? He's gone round saying he's privately delighted the unions have walked into his trap. That is the reality. He's been spoiling for this fight.
And let me repeat again what he said in June. It is wrong to strike when negotiations are going on. And yet today, he now backs the strikes. Why? Because he's irresponsible, left-wing and weak.
The difference is that, unlike him, I'm not going to demonise the dinner lady, the cleaner, the nurse. People who earn in a week what the Chancellor pays for his annual skiing holiday.
And so the strikers struck. But did it really change anything? Yes, the public sector let off steam, but did it make a deal more or less likely? It all depends whose spin you believe. And there was some of that over at the Leveson inquiry this week, where Alistair Campbell gave evidence and Andy Coulson was part of the evidence. There were some sharp exchanges.
Did your editors know that voicemails were being intercepted?
Yes. In that we did all these things for our editors, for Rebecca Brooks and for Andy Coulson. And they're the scum of journalism for trying to drop me and all my colleagues in it.
At the moment, I think we have a press that has just become, frankly, putrid in many of its elements. And let me emphasise, not all journalists and not all titles.
So the mood music from Westminster this week was dire. No more growth, no more pampering. Thank you, Adrian. Just cuts, cuts and more cuts. The only answer, perhaps, stiff upper lip. And for now, not a hairy one. This is one cut, though, that perhaps everyone supports.
The BBC's James Landale having a close shave with the Pall Mall Barbers in central London.